Hello and welcome to Community Chats. I'm your host, Aley Hammer, and today we're joined with Justin Merrell, the Group Environment Director at Lion. Justin, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about the very important topic of sustainability. So can you start by sharing what Lion's sustainability pledge is?
Thanks, Ali. Good to join you. The sustainability for Lion, at our heart, Lion is about sociability. So it's about bringing people together to sustain community and connection within the community. And I think it's particularly important, due to the rise of social media and the recent COVID outbreak, we've seen a lot of people isolated and living in these virtual echo chambers. So it doesn't feel very healthy or inclusive. So our sustainability strategy really revolves around the community and that connection. So we have three core pillars, if you like. One's around responsibility, which is, to be honest, the main focus for Lion, because really our sustainability depends on the responsible consumption of our products. And that really is table stakes for an alcohol company and requires 100% authentic effort. The second pillar is around community, where we really focus on fostering that community spirit and the connection, like I said earlier, and really supporting charities that with a lean towards mental health. And the third pillar, which is my pillar, is around the environment. And I suppose there's an element of table stakes with regard to the environment, which is the compliance and the systems element. But there's also the sustainability leadership, which we've been really pushing hard into over the last couple of years, and really, I guess, moving from that minimising harm through zero harm and ultimately wanting to drive positive impact into the environment.
It's so inspiring to hear that a company as big as Lion is so invested in sustainability practices. And Justin, we've heard that you define sustainability a little bit differently at Lion. So can you tell us what your definition is?
Look, the simple answer is our leadership principle, which is do the right thing for the long term. Now, for some reason, that resonates really well within the business. I think it's a nice antidote to that short-termism, which seems to dominate sort of politics and a lot of business decisions. So I think it also provides a way to express what you know in your heart is the right thing to do. So it's been quite an effective principle for us. And at its core, it's about intergenerational equity. So it's about leaving the planet in a better condition than what it is today for future generations, which really leans into that sort of traditional definition of sustainability. There's other principles of sustainability, one of them around the internalisation of environmental costs in the business decisions. And really for a long time, that's felt like a pipe dream, because it is such a challenging task to put a cost on the environment. But we're starting to see the emergence of natural capital markets in particular that really start to feel like they're going to stick. And it's super exciting, I think, as you sort of look to capitalism to hopefully, steer us out of this climate change problem. It seems like we're on the cusp of some really exciting things around natural capital. And Lion is a carbon neutral organisation, and it's really interesting when we announced our certification and we used carbon offsetting to make that final step. We now effectively have an internal carbon price within the organisation, and this wasn't something I had anticipated when taking us into carbon neutral, but it's working really well that there's an awareness now in the business that there's $1 per tonne of carbon that we emit, and it's starting to find its way into business cases and other discussions. So that's quite exciting. I guess the other component too that I wanted to mention was that we've also started our reconciliation action plan with Reconciliation Australia. The last 12 months has been quite invigorating, because the Reflect Reconciliation Action Plan, which is the stage we're at, it's just about listening and learning. So you've basically told you're not there to solve the problem. You've just got to listen and learn and understand perspectives of First Nations and Indigenous people, and it's been really refreshing. And I really loved learning about that connection between Indigenous people and the country, and that their belief is that the country owns them and they're effectively just passing through, but as they're passing through, their job is to care for country. And it really flips that conventional mindset that we own the land and we're entitled to do a level of harm to that land. So it's been really rewarding, I guess, hearing about that perspective as well. And that stares into that sustainability principle around intergenerational equity and the gaps that exist across the community, and not just for black and white, but could be around income or could be around standards of living. I think it's helpful for a company as they're building their strategy out to think about those issues and how to entwine them into their social purpose. So that's the longer answer. But yeah, ultimately we tick most of the definition of the official definition of sustainable development, but we tend to focus in around sociability and living well, and obviously a healthy environment is part of that.
It's really interesting to me to hear about how sustainability means different things to different people, and that you're constantly learning, and it's really cool. So thank you so much for sharing, especially how you've worked on your pledge to make it your own. I really love that. So can you tell me a little bit about how you achieved the carbon neutral breweries? This is so cool. Why is it important to you, and what are you guys doing in this space?
Yeah, look, it was really surprising for one of the senior leaders in the business to come up and say, what would it take to get to carbon neutral? Because as a sustainability practitioner, they're the conversations you kind of dream about. And fortunately, this was a conversation not long after I joined Lion, and I had a look at Lion's track record in terms of its climate action, and it was really authentic. Like, we had made some really big strides into direct carbon reduction. We had strong energy efficiency performance. We'd installed biogas plants at our two largest breweries at 4X and 2Es. We were putting solar on top of the 4X brewery up in Brisbane, and we were about to sign up to a renewable power purchase agreement. So if you sort of stacked all that together, you've got quite a strong track record on climate action and direct reduction. So the proposition ultimately was, well, look, you've got such a good, authentic case to basically take that last step, which is a carbon neutral organisation through the purchase of carbon offsets. So with the way that we pitched it was that this is your last lever. Like, if you're doing energy efficiency, you've got on-site solar, you've got access to large-scale solar farms, you're using biogas, pull the last lever, become a carbon neutral organisation, and basically stare into that sort of net zero position. So that was ultimately the pitch, and that's what got us across the line. So the other part of the pitch, which was quite important, probably the most important, was being selective about the way we chose carbon offset projects. So you can visit a broker and buy the cheapest ones you can get and tick the box. It wasn't about that. It was about setting up some principles behind what projects we were going to invest in, and making sure we stuck to those principles, but at the same time, obviously staying within our offset budget. So, for example, we have a minimum 20% commitment to domestic offset projects in Australia, and we try to target those offset projects which produce the co-benefits and the shared value. So one of the projects we invest in is up at Arnhem Land, where they employ Indigenous rangers to manage the fuel loads on the savannas, and that's an Australian carbon credit unit, so it's a legitimate offsetting project, even though it involves burning fuel on the ground. Ultimately, it prevents the wildfires, which cause a lot of damages as well. So in that sense, it's about leveraging that Indigenous knowledge and providing them financial support to continue with those fire management practices that have been developed over thousands and thousands of years. So it's about being quite clever in terms of how you carbon offset, and not just looking at it as a means to get to an outcome.
It's so incredible. I mean, you literally are one of Australia's first large-scale carbon neutral breweries, and you could quite literally change the way that we brew in the future for all companies. So it's incredible. Finally, Justin, can you tell us a little bit about your future sustainability goals for Lion? Because you guys have done so much already. Where are you heading? Like, what's next for you?
Yeah, look, we have quite a number of goals and targets, and some of them are quite long-term. For example, we've got science-based targets at the 1.5 degree global warming trajectory. That amounts to a 55% reduction in our direct emissions over the next 10 years. Similarly, most of the emissions in a bottle of beer, next time you're holding a bottle of beer, think about, over 50% of the emissions in that product, reside in the glass bottle that contains your beer. So the bulk of our emissions over the life cycle of a beer are actually outside our direct control. So we've also set ourselves a Scope 3 science-based target, which is 30% reduction over the next 10 years. And that will involve working with suppliers and getting an understanding where we can work together on jointly reducing emissions. We also have a 100% renewable electricity target in Australia and New Zealand. Want to be using 100% by 2025. And we'll continue the carbon certification as well, carbon neutral certification. Packaging is another key pillar for Lion. Our goals there are to have 100% recyclable packaging by 2025 and greater than 50% recycled content. And they're really clever these days about how they define recyclability. So just because it's technically recyclable doesn't mean it actually gets called recyclable. It's got to be recovered, and then it's got to be turned into a new product for it to be considered recyclable. So it's quite a smart, clever definition. So that's why we've set ourselves a recycled content target. We basically want proof that we're using products that have been recycled. And we, in addition to that, we conduct life cycle analysis on all our new products. The other, water is also a key pillar of our sustainability strategy. 98% of the water used for beer production is actually outside the breweries. So it's the dry cropping of the barley that uses the vast majority of the water when you make a litre of beer. So we focus a lot on the supply chain. And again, I think there's opportunities there with carbon offsetting. We know that soil carbon, so putting carbon back into the soil sequestration offers opportunity not only for removing carbon from the atmosphere, but it also offers better chance of water retention in those soils. It's rebuilding or regenerating the agricultural soils that we rely on for our ingredients. So in terms of brewery performance, we aim to target 2.4 litres of water per litre of beer produced. And again, there's a lot of water that's used in producing beer, and it's not just going into the beer, a lot of it's in the cleaning to maintain the quality of the product. So at a softer level, I think the sweet spot is in the supply chain. I think if you look at leaders in this space like Unilever are often called out, their latest refreshed strategy, it's basically all focused on the supply chain. And it's almost like we've got our backyard in order, things are looking good. Now what's next? We're going to look over the fence and have a look at what our suppliers are doing and seeing if we can't make a difference in that space as well. So a good example of that is that every time you send Unilever a product or an ingredient, they're expecting a carbon footprint on that invoice, right? So they can get an understanding of where the emissions are across their broader value chain. So I think that cooperation and those partnerships are really going to be that sweet spot moving forward to continue to accelerate the action on climate change.
Justin, I wish we could talk for longer. I am so fascinated and inspired by the work that you guys are doing at Lion. So thank you so much for living and breathing this important topic. It's obvious from speaking to you that it's not just something that you guys focus on 10% of the time. It's really at the roots and core everything that you do. So thank you so much. Thank you for being on the show. And I'd really love to touch base in a couple of months and hear about all the new developments and talk to you again. So thank you for coming on the show. And to all our viewers at home, if you have any questions, please pop them in the comments below and we'll try to get back to you. Thank you.